this. An SME that stays an SME is an SME that has refused to scale or has refused to find avenues to scale.
Yes,
But
absolutely. Yes. Reason why the SMEs are not able to scale is not because of money. It's primarily because of the business model, which is not really that scalable.
I think what ends up happening is I will take a controversial take on this. An SME that stays an SME is an SME that has refused to scale or has refused to find avenues to scale.
Yes,
But
absolutely. Yes.
They have just refused to scale.
Correct.
Because we know a lot of SMEs, even within our own circle that we know, especially in Coimbatore, so many people start off as SMEs.
Correct.
And these SMEs have grown to large corporations, have gone IPO. Like, I think we can take a few proud Coimbatore names to recall, Craftsman. Many of these examples are small and medium enterprises that are born out of need in Craftsman Automation, second gone, already gone public. These enterprises were born because they had a need. They ended up finding a very small niche that they need to solve, and then they ended up solving that as well. I think those are really cool examples again out of Coimbatore, right? Yeah.
So we have a lot of such examples based out of Coimbatore. Reason why the SMEs are not able to scale is not because of money. It is primarily because of the business model, which is not really that scalable. So, and sometimes the entrepreneur is the reason too. They really don't want to lose the control and grow the organization. They want to be certain about everything. In business, nothing is really certain. A lot of uncertainty is there. How do you manage that uncertainties? How do you re-risk all the people all the risk which is involved? Something which you need to understand and work on it consistently. It is not a one-time effort, it's a continuous effort. So building an organization without any risk, without any challenge or uncertainty is something which is completely utopian.
It's a very human thing, right? Think about it, right? I think insecurity is very uncomfortable for human. I think when we are inherently forced into a position of choosing between, say, object A or objective A and objective B, and saying that either you will have money or you will have freedom, right? And then the irony is that the startup is a weird Venn diagram mix between those two, right? There is a possibility of money and a possibility of freedom, but ironically, there's a possibility of lack of both at the same time as well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
possibilities there.
When you are pushed into that sort of an extreme, I think humans end up becoming a bit averse to taking that risk, and I think they start questioning.
Yeah, I would say we are not averse to pick that risk. We are actually programmed to avoid that risk.
Fair. Yeah. So I think that is that psychological conditioning that sort of comes in, right? Because as human beings, we are seekers of comfort, right? This sofa is more comfortable for me. I shall purchase said sofa So I think that sort of drives change, that sort of drives behavior a lot. But in a way, I think that is a really cool aspect that a lot of new age startups are tapping into.
Yeah.
Think about it, right?
See, another aspect of why many entrepreneurs are unable to scale is primarily because a lot of people actually start business just for money. Okay, so if your intention is just to make money, there are a million ways than building a startup or even an MSN. You just start small and you can scale in a million ways. You can make money in a million different ways, not necessarily that you have to start a business and do it. So when you have a limited goal, say for example, I want to build a house, I just want to build this brand of car, I want to have this kind of lifestyle. Most of the people do not know what to do once they achieve that. That is where most of the companies stay back as in not really moving forward beyond that.
I would say, I think key aspect of what I've seen is that there's a lot of people that have really cool ideas that make amazing SMEs. In my humble opinion, I really don't think that there's nothing wrong with running a strong and fledgling small medium enterprise, because if you're able to generate the amount of revenue that you can that satisfies your needs, it's able to sort of scale to your satisfaction, then for a lot of people it still works as a model that just works for you.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, as long as you're happy, you can.
Content.
Happy and contented.
Nothing matters more. But sort of one area that I would strongly recommend is there's a lot of governmental push on a bunch of incentives. So I think if anyone's looking around building SMEs, I would say please look at all the SME incentives that are available from the government. There are tons of organizations that also give out incentives for SMEs. It could be licenses, it could be cloud credits and stuff like that. A lot of cloud providers and hyperscalers offer, as an example. So today, even SMEs, not just startups, but a lot of SMEs also end up getting a ton of benefit. And there are a lot of special interest groups that represent SMEs and startups today as well. So I think it's very interesting to see sort of the versioning of that sort of ability for people to create a business and sort of move on from there. But one thing that sort of comes to me, I think it's $1 million question for me to ask, and I don't think we just prepared for this, but why Makers Hub?
The idea is, if you look at, say, last about 17, 18 years of my career, starting off with NEN, National Entrepreneurship Network, a Wadhwani Foundation initiative. From a long period, we have been thinking that entrepreneurship is not buzzing in India primarily because we don't build the right set of engineers or entrepreneurs from the colleges. But after working for almost a decade with NEN, I understood, even after building curriculum for nurturing entrepreneurs, we couldn't actually look at the environment in a positive way, or we couldn't bring in the numbers which we planned to achieve. So then we understood somewhere else is the problem. And we never guessed that the problems could have been in the schools. Is it a sin to look at schools? No, definitely not. The challenge is the schools have been framed almost 100 years ago, the structure of the schools. India has developed a lot in the last 100 years, but the models the schools are running on is yet to move forward, a way forward, or at least exponential shift from the existing school model to deliver what is expected out of the children, to make the children's life better. Current ecosystem is not fulfilling the needs of the children. Forget about the needs of the parent, forget about the needs of the country, forget about the needs of the business. They couldn't even satisfy our own children's requirement. So that is where we thought we should do something about it.
Bharanidharan, my co-founder at Makers Hub, was working with education institutions as a STEM education service provider for more than a decade. I had been working with him for the past 3-4 years, trying to find more opportunities in the STEM education and trying to scale the venture. Over a period of time, we understood the model had a limited potential to grow. So we tried to restructure the same business model to understand how it can cater in a better way to the students and also find more opportunities to grow as a business. That's when we set up Makers Hub as a lab which facilitates the kids to learn science, technology, engineering and mathematics added with arts and with a research attitude, transforming STEM into stream education. While doing this, we also tried to demonstrate the same to kids. We had an opportunity to meet hundreds of kids and they came here for demo sessions. We understood that the kids were experiential learning was more effective than the classroom learning. So we understood and we designed our mantra, play, practice and progress, basically to ensure that they play more and come back to the whiteboard for learning, and again practice more and come back to research mode for building new products.
I think so. I think to put it easily, I think Vijay has been someone that had a very strong opinion about the formal education sector. If you don't know how the formal education sector started, please check on the whole Macaulay Reform chapter. It's a very strong and very interesting part of Indian history.
Absolutely.
You need to know how this education system that we have today came out. For many of you that don't understand, it's a rabbit hole that you can go down on. So strongly recommend you looking at the Macaulay education system. It was a system that was meant to divide us among and it was clearly intended towards something else. And you'll notice that even if you look at the UK and if you look at the boards of education that the UK uses, like the IGCSE or the Cambridge education system, the O levels and all that, they have already moved ahead to a system that's completely different to application and understanding, trying to get how stuff works and pieces like that more than anything else. Whereas largely we've continued to sort of stay in the same zone. We have learned on theory, with some practical education and learning, but it's been a constant wild effort for us to sort of go into teaching our children concepts rather than teaching our children education. And I mean that. Right? It's not about them learning something for the sake of learning it. Something that they can learn so they can apply is a bigger issue.
See, I don't believe children need to be taught. They need to be mentored. They need to be facilitated for learning. So that's what Makers Hub is offering in a very precise manner.
And I think a lot of that applies to small and medium businesses and startups as well today, because I think there are 1,000 people that run startup workshops and startup schools and a lot of those things. Really, I have never benefited from something like that in my life. But I think the one thing that I have immensely benefited from is networking, having strong conversations around chai, and basically talking about problems that you have. I think I still remember, I think when me and my other co-founder were building another startup, I think Vijay sir came in, for example, as a business validation guy. He sat down, he took a day out of his time, he came, sat down with us, whiteboarded with us, and just did it for us, for example. And for makers, for example, I do the same thing. I come and do that. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if you're intending to build a strong ecosystem of people that can support each other and help each other, it exponentially ends up paying rewards as an ecosystem. And I think that is a foundational need of what we need to drive today, building that ecosystem of support.
See, one reason why an ecosystem actually would make, rather than one company or a bunch of companies which is into incubation or acceleration, is the ecosystem actually tries to give a perspective of reality in a very friendly manner. The incubators have to push themselves too hard after putting in the money and then, running on a deadline. The founders' learning is at the initial stages of first 3 years is very, very harsh. And most of the founders feel it injustifying when somebody says your project will not work, or your business will not work, your model will not work. So they find it difficult to even digest the fact that somebody has said no to it. But the reality is that is the basic of startup. If they say it will not work, try to get the best understanding from them about the why of it is not going to work. Because that will give you a new perspective, and it will actually give you a new opportunity for you to work in a long period of time.
One thing I'll tell is that, so whenever I meet ecosystem enablers across India at least, and I've met a bunch of ecosystem enablers across in different ecosystems outside of India as well, what I notice is that the Indian ecosystem is very different in a way that there's a lot of people that are willing to help, but ironically there's a lot of people that are not willing to ask for assistance as well.
It's a true factor. So again, I blame it on the education. So I really don't like what the education is being pushed through your schools. I'm not really a big fan of it. Somehow I sailed through it. Even my father, if you ask him even now, surprised that I was able to sail through it successfully. If I am able to manipulate, calculate what my teachers can do with my examination, I think I was way more intelligent than my teachers. But that intelligence is very, very raw. It requires a lot of handholding, and it requires a lot of effort and learning and unlearning to become a successful entrepreneur or an investor, or whatever you want to become in your life. So a mentor is required. Every teacher should be a mentor. That is what I expect out of them. So that can happen only when you remove that stupid examination system. Any other way is never going to work.
Ironically, I think what's ended up happening is that we've created a system of people feeling false sense of achievement from gaining skills that actually have little to very minimal impact in real world application.
Very
right.
Very
So you gain so many skills that you will be barely able to apply. And with the advent of AI, I think half of that is out the door now. For anyone that's not read the memo on what's happening with artificial intelligence today, I think from content writing to copywriting to SEO to writing code and building websites.
Technology actually plays a big part of it. I still feel the human part of writing a prompt makes a huge difference with respect to AI. Still 90% of the people who are using AI do not know how to write a prompt.
But the fact is, it's all questioning the way questioning the way education works today as a whole, right? Which then brings into perspective the fact that if only learners were able to understand the core concepts of how said thing works versus knowledge of said thing working. So if I were to break it down, I would say that today the education system works on a fact of saying, if you have gained knowledge of said thing works, it's enough. For example, we're right next to the Coimbatore airport where we're recording this right now, which is where Makers Hub is. You can see the tarmac and the planes taking off. Like it's very easy for people to say that, oh, aeroplanes take off because lift. What lift, right? Like how does lift happen? Like how does lift happen over a pair of wings, and how does that create pressure? How does that create the ability for an object to move at such a weight above? Nobody thinks about that. But our physics textbooks were perfectly happy with telling us, and still are perfectly happy with telling us that it's lift.
Yeah.
Nobody tells you how lift works. Like why does a drone fly, right? It's because it needs to have a certain amount of pressure that it
That is where the support problem starts.
Yeah.
When you say lift and the examination is getting satisfied with this answer, The problem ends there. Nobody has an intuition to look at beyond that level and see what exactly is the lift which he is talking about, he or she is talking about. So the examination actually limits you to learn rather than allowing you to learn more.